My name is Jake. I'm the Legislative Affairs Manager for OACB, or the Ohio Association of County Boards. I have been there since January of 2024, so I'm starting year three, and it has picked up like no other. I just want to say from the top that, we recognize a lot of the fast pace back and forth that is happening at both the state and federal levels, but also that just know that we are watching all of the things that are happening. We are meeting with both state and federal partners. Both agencies at the state and federal levels to just make sure that we have all the information that we can when we provide information to county boards, who then can provide that to families and providers. So we have been working really hard throughout that. Just an overview, county boards serve 117,000 Ohioans with developmental disabilities, around 50,000 children, and we are funded primarily through local property taxes. So we'll get into some of those aspects down the line, but we are primarily funded through local property taxes. But we also have state resources such as different grants that are able to be used through county boards, as well as maximizing federal Medicaid dollars and different types of reimbursements. We provide services such as early intervention, educational and family support, support and service administration, employment training, and a list of other different services. So, one thing, Lisa, if you want to go to the next slide. So, this is the how services are funded generally in Ohio through the county board. So 72% are through property taxes. Then you have about a couple of 6% that are through other local revenue sources. So that can be community grants, different partnerships with businesses, things of that sort. And then you have other different types of state and federal revenue, which includes those other grants as well. And some of that maximizing billing reimbursements. So, as I said, we do operate under the majority of funding, which is property taxes. However, out of the $25 billion of property taxes that are collected in the state, county boards only collect about 1.17 billion of that. That was the number back in 2024, so we'll have updated numbers here shortly, but that is roughly only 5% of the total property taxes statewide. So when we have been meeting with legislators in the last year and a half over the various different bills around property taxes, this has been something that we've been highlighting throughout those conversations, is that it is only 5% of the total property tax picture, but that 5% means a lot to to our population and to people with developmental disabilities. That is a major funding stream. And so when we have these bills that are out there that would limit, the amount of property taxes that a county board might collect, or there's recent ones that would allow a county to double its homestead exemption, which ultimately leads to less money coming into a county board for services. That's where the concern arises, is that that funding is being reduced. Another thing that is interesting, that is important to know about county boards, is that county boards do not receive inside millage. So when a county board has a levy that has been voted, every year after that, it does not receive those automatic increases that you hear about, that the schools may receive. County boards do not receive that inside millage. And so I have it pulled up right here. County boards statewide have a voted millage of 431.8 mills. However, county boards statewide are operating at 254.2 mills. So we are operating on half of what the millage has been voted in for county board services across this state. So that is something, as inflation goes up, those dollars are not increasing. So we have some county boards who have had levies on the books since the 2000s that have not seen an increase because they have not gone back on the ballot. So, we like to say that that's one of the reasons county boards have been fiscally responsible. But it shows that the reliance on property taxes may not be sustainable long term as property taxes and voters are starting to become more focused on what those increases look like on their property tax bills. Lisa, if you want to go to the next. So we were founded by families in 1967, and we were created because no system existed for people with developmental disabilities to be supported. And so that is what we want to, when we meet with legislators, you see there and on the top right corner, we have Michelle Gifford, who is a county board member from Pickaway County. She came in to testify on what being a county board member, as well as the services she receives through property tax dollars, what that means to her and the life she's able to live. And then the same beneath that, that was Crawford County's board. We met with State Rep Reardon McLean to kind of share that same message. But the thing that we really want them to leave with is that county boards are a family developed, family run system. The reason that county boards are able to be successful in the lives of people with disabilities is because it has that community aspect where that local funding piece is there because the local voters know what those needs are for a particular county. The needs in a southeastern county are going to be quite different than the needs that are needed in a Cuyahoga County or a Northwest Ohio County. And so, as you see there at the bottom, today more than half of board members have lived experience or family members. And we think that is the most important thing that this state knows about the county board system is that it is family run. Our board of trustees, we have a majority of family members or people served that are a part of our board of trustees. And so that is something that as we have these property tax discussions, these are dollars that go towards a person's life. These are lifelong services that are provided by county boards, and it is important that they receive those services throughout their lifetime. All right, Lisa, I don't know if there's another one. Yeah, so um, property tax in our system is something that has, we need stability, we need flexibility because that local aspect that I was just talking about, if we are not able to use some of those community funds in ways that better certain, specific communities, then we're not providing a statewide system that allows people to live happy, healthy, and independent lives that they want to choose. And so some of the ways that property taxes could be affected is Medicaid matching funds. So the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, that didn't necessarily impact funds that would come into the developmental disability system directly. However, a lot of those changes could impact the amount of Medicaid funding that goes into the system, which could ultimately draw down on those Medicaid matching funds that are provided by county boards. And then county board service capacity. So making sure that as services increase and as more people are coming into the system, those county board dollars, property tax dollars are only going to be able to be used so far. And something that we have also been sharing with legislators is that Medicaid waiver match is a mandated service. So it is a mandated service by county boards. It is actually the only statutorily mandated service at this time. And so if there comes a point when county boards are unable to begin meeting those expectations, that's where state and federal funding are going to have to come into play, and that takes time based on how fiscal calendars work, as well as that's a lot of money that would come into our system. County boards paid roughly $620 million towards the state's Medicaid match in fiscal year 24. It's expected to rise to 690 million. So those are property tax dollars that are going towards that Medicaid waiver match that ultimately can't be easily or quickly replaced if property tax dollars are not there. All right, Lisa, do we have any? Yeah, I have a couple other just quick statistics that that we share with legislators just to try to understand how the property tax funding for county boards differs from other systems that use property tax dollars. We county boards project their revenues and their expenses in long-term projections. Oftentimes it's done in 5 to 10 years. And so when you're looking at property tax dollars that are ultimately decreasing throughout that 5 to 10 year period, that could really cause some struggle when you're trying to make sure that you have the dollars there to provide those services. So when we ask the legislature for stability when it comes to property taxes, that's kind of what we're talking about, is that ability to plan long term, because our system is one that is a lifelong system. And so we need to make sure that if a child is starting to receive services at 10, that they're able to continue to receive those services, at age 50 or further. So um, I believe that's kind of, just the rundown of how um, property taxes work within the county board system at this time. I think the biggest thing to remember is that property tax dollars, are used towards um, a lot of the mandated services, which is the Medicaid waiver match, mainly, and that when those property tax dollars are stretched, that leaves just kind of little community funding that could be used for some of those other programs. So I see a question in here. So, inside millage and outside millage. So, inside millage is an automatic increase. Um, they're unvoted increases. So every year after, the next year after an evaluation, those would increase every year along with inflation. But those that do not receive inside millage, those stay at the level that they were voted on. And so I believe county boards are the only entity that don't receive inside millage. Schools, libraries, park districts, they do receive that outside millage. And so that is why when we've met with legislators, we've tried to really um, hammer that message.
Hey Jake, sorry. I just wanted to, that's really helpful. Thank you. Um, so just to be clear, for many of our systems that do receive that increase along with inflation, is that like commensurate with inflation? Is there a set percentage? How does that determination work?
Yeah, let me find out that exact answer, because I've honestly been very focused on the no inside millage part. So I want to be sure that if I'm giving you an accurate number on how that works outside of us.
Okay, thank you.
And is there a reason? I can answer it, Joni, if you like.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you, Leanne.
Okay. So when you are a benefactor of inside millage, there's a floor. So depending on which type of entity you are, for schools, it's typically 20 mil floor. Mil is not millions. Mil is a recognition of a percentage of a dollar, for lack of a better way to explain that. But let's just use the schools. That's the easiest example. Most of them are use what's called a 20 mil floor. So if they are not collecting at 20 mils, then every time there's a property reevaluation and the property values go up, their taxes go up until they reach that 20 mil floor. Once they reach that 20 mil floor, they do not collect any further. Same thing with like local government. It's typically a 10 mil. Once it reaches that 10 mil floor, which is the least you can collect, then they don't collect any additional increases. Does that help answer that? It's still very complicated. We need a county auditor on here to really explain it to us, but that's like the layman's version.
So it's a floor. What's the ceiling? Like what's what's
Well,
the max or
the
what
ceiling
determines the
would be
max?
based on whatever you pass, right? So if you're at
Got
the
it.
floor and the floor is not meeting your needs, we are not one of those entities, so I don't live in this space, then you would go back and maybe ask for an additional levy, additional millage.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Why are county boards not eligible for millet or inside millage?
I think that one predates a lot of us on this call, unfortunately. I know there's a couple lawyers that OACB has invited to its conference that kind of talk about the background and the history of that inside millage piece. I'm not I you know I'm sure there's some history around it, maybe potentially around I know county boards ultimately started also as schools, and so there could be some tie in there, but uh, I'm not entirely sure on the history of how that came to be.
Well,
I don't know if Leanne knows.
one piece is that county boards are able to run continuous levies, which means that we don't have to go back. We don't have to run levies that expire in 5 and 10 years because our services are birth to death. So we do get the benefit of a continuous, forever levy. And I think that's part of the logic behind why we don't necessarily get the inside millage as well. But I'm too young to know exactly. I'm pretending.
Leanne, can you explain that a little more? Because then why every 5 years
Well, it
do we
depends on the
need?
county board. Some county boards have a mix. Some county boards use continuous levies, and a lot of counties have moved, their commission has asked that they move to more of a renewal type. So even in your big counties that may have a 5 or a 10 year renewal, they may also have an old continuous from like 1978 that is forever on the books, but it's collecting at a very low value. So it may be only collecting 10 cents on the dollar or something like that. It just depends on the county. Different counties have different approaches. This is the beauty of local control and local government, right? Some commissioners really like this idea of being on a cycle of coming back. And when I talk about our county, I'll explain why that has actually been a deficit for us that we are on continuous millage.
Jake or Jacob, I'm not sure which of you would be better poised to respond to this question, but my understanding is that very recently, I think it was last July, and some of the language that was passed in our budget, well, not just in our budget, but when Governor DeWine signed the next budget into law, that there were changes around that same language on renewal levies versus like how often they had to be approved. Could either of you speak to that? Or Jen, I see you nodding. I'm not sure who feels the most willing to answer.
So there were a couple pieces that were in the budget. So I want to make sure that I'm talking about the right one. So there was one that would replace or that would eliminate replacement levies. Is that one, does that sound like along the same lines? Okay. Yes. So, and I'm gonna try my best to also explain this, but I'm sure Leanne may have better answers as well. But so in those instances, when you have a levy like that, and you want to bring that millage up to the current effective millage, you would replace that levy, which would then bring that millage from 98 up to if I believe it would it be the same, like could you use it on that 98 millage?
Yeah, it's the same millage, but it's on current values. So
Yeah,
when you replace, it tells you you have to name when that starts, and it starts at the replacement value. So if it starts in January of 27, it's that snapshot of the values in January of 2027.
thank you. So the legislature eliminated that option in the budget. And so, I think Leanne can attest. She's been in some of these meetings with legislature, with the legislature and us, and they've asked, well, why don't you just, bring it up to, current values? And the answer has been, well, we would run a replacement levy. Unfortunately, we no longer can do that. So that was one of the pieces that I think you were talking about. The other was, there were language about budget commissions and how that would play when it comes to a voter approved levy. There was language around allowing a county budget commission to reduce that voter approved levy if they found it to be unreasonable or excessive, or unnecessary and excessive, I think were the two terms that were used. And they didn't have really definitions. So part of Governor DeWine's veto of that, he put together a work group that developed more property tax recommendations because apparently we haven't had enough. And they ended up taking some of that language, which defined those unreasonable definitions, and put that into House Bill 309. But they also included a requirement that if there is discussion about reducing an entity, that they would have the opportunity to come and testify. So a county board, if they were going to be reduced by that budget commission, they would have, there is a requirement that the county board would have an opportunity to come and testify on why those resources would be needed. So there's been a lot that ended up becoming bill and becoming law. So that is now law. We have, as county boards, we have worked with county budget commissions throughout our history. We have counties that have worked with them very well. We have counties that have some concerns with their county budget commissions, or their county budget commissions have some concerns with some of their funding. But that's local government. But that's the way our system is set up. And ultimately people ask, is that how things should be? And we're recognized on national levels for the services that are provided in Ohio. We go to conferences often where they're giving speeches on things that we've done 2 or 3 years prior. So I think it is what makes our system successful and unique. But obviously we're having this discussion because we see some of the things that are out there that might make that service delivery a little more difficult.
Thank you to all of you who shared in answering that question. I think because of the changes, when he originally passed the budget, he vetoed some of those components, and then they came back and they overrode his veto for, I think, 3 of those pieces. So it's just been a little bit tricky to keep track of where things are impacted and where they aren't. So it's really helpful to hear the clear outline of not just where it was impacted, but then kind of some of the contingencies that were put into place with it. I appreciate that.
Yeah, if you don't mind, could I also just highlight 2 more that are kind of out there that are playing a
That
role?
would be great.
Something that was also included in the budget that we're just kind of starting to see more and more now at the local level, and I'm not sure if someone will end up talking about this as well, but it's allowing county commissioners to adopt a resolution that would double the homestead exemption. It's called the homestead exemption piggyback. And so that would, it increases that homestead exemption for those taxpayers, but ultimately that reduces the amount of tax dollars that are coming into a county board. So we're starting to see county commissioners. There's also another piece in that regarding, I can't remember the specific 2.5% that they reference, but it's another component that county commissioners are able to add on.
Owner occupied.
Yes, thank you. And so those are 2 different pieces that county commissioners are now able to utilize that would reduce some of the property tax dollars that are coming. And we're seeing it happen across the state already. And then one bill that has started to gain a little bit of traction in the General Assembly that would be pretty harmful to county boards, which I think, based on these conversations, is it would end continuing levies. So starting in the year 2030, it would end continuing levies and max those out at 5 or 10 year, or max those out at a term limit of 10-year levies. And as we discussed, continuing levies are an important piece for a lot of counties. It's what's been able to keep a lot of counties off the ballot. And so that would be pretty harmful for our system. So that's one that we are actually watching pretty closely, just because of the impact that would have on county boards and services we provide.
I understand from what you're saying. I think I have and anybody else can ask questions too, guys. Sorry, I came with a list. But I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more. I understand the homestead exemption piece. That feels clear to me. Could you talk a little bit more about the owner occupancy exemption?
Yes, Leanne, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to ask. Do you know, this is the one I'm not as familiar about.
We don't have it. We have it in our county, but it's a credit for people that actually own and live in their homes. But I don't think many commissioners are actually using that option because it is highly impactful because a lot of people get that credit, even though it's small. But then once you add it up to everyone, so I don't know the percentage. Do you know it, Jake?
No, I don't know the percentage. I think it might just be doubled. But yeah.
But I have not
Any of
heard any
these.
counties that they're using that additional
Oh,
feature.
sorry. Yeah, I'm not sure on that number of counties. No, it might be in their fiscal analysis, but um,
But overall, all of these different policies are ways that we either reduce the amount of property taxes, period, right? Whether it's a rate, whether it's, a continuing levy versus a renewal. And then on the other hand, like while we're doing that, we're also kind of getting the double whammy of, you know, increasing the exemption categories
mhm.
for people, properties, et cetera, that then don't have to pay taxes. So we're both reducing the income from everybody who does pay property taxes and reducing the quantity of people that have to, or quantity of properties that qualify to have to pay property taxes. So it's a little bit of a 1-2 hit.
Yep. And it seems, to just kind of be that perfect storm of when evaluations happened as well and post-COVID and yeah.
And we're going to have all of these Medicaid cuts coming too. So, like you said, a perfect storm. Plus, I mean, at this point, because of all the way that they did the property, they do that every 6 years. We should have been in okay territory, right? So, like all of our property values, most of us are going up. So, schools and county boards and libraries and safety and CPS and all these things that are funded by property taxes should have been in a good spot. So of course that put us in a situation where whoa, 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 there's a lot of lobbying going on, and the homestead exemption and the owner occupied tax legislation were like the compromise to getting rid of property taxes. So um, there's not a whole lot of need to compromise at our state government level since we have a supermajority. Um, but we have a governor still that doesn't want to completely get rid of property taxes right now. But we don't know what's going to happen in the next 10 months and who the governor is going to be and what's going to happen there. And so I think having this discussion now is really important, and understanding um, what we're trying to do, I think, with some of these bills is to ensure that our vote matters. So, like the inside outside millage is a one thing we vote on, the other thing we don't. County commissioners, we vote for county commissioners, right? Like, whereas, so we have that in our power to vote them out if we don't like what they do on like the local level. So that's why I think it's really important to understand this stuff. I'm glad we're having this discussion. It is really complicated. I've tried myself to understand all of this. We've had Adam Herman come and talk to our board here at the Arc of Ohio, and we all, I think, walked away from that like, what? Exactly. I thought I understood it, but I don't quite understand what all of these parties are doing. The parties that are working on trying to get rid of property taxes, it doesn't appear they'd have to get that on the ballot, completely get rid of property taxes. That would have to be on those petitions would have to be in at the end of July. It doesn't appear that they're going to get there. So that's one little piece of good news, I guess, that it probably will not be on the ballot in November. Um, but there's a lobby that's a grassroots lobby trying to do that. But there's also a lobby for basically making sure that the people who are paying higher taxes are at the bottom and not the top. Um, and I mean that like higher percentage and working class. Like it's going to come back. If property taxes are gone, who's going to pay the income and the sales tax? It's going to be the working class. It's not going to be the higher classes. So there are a couple different things going on to try to move this. And of course, at the federal level, that's coming down too. They want to make sure the state, we're going to cut over $1 trillion in federal Medicaid funding going to the states. So it's going to again push us to have to figure out what do we want to do here in Ohio? What kind of state do we want to be?
Jen, can I ask you and Jake a question regarding mandates? So if the Medicaid waiver match is mandated, but home and community-based services are not mandated, um, what does that mean in terms of, would they just discontinue home and community-based services?
So some states are starting to happen. In Idaho, for instance, um, we're seeing some much more regressive things happen and conversations happening at their legislature. It's already begun. So yes, I think the push and pull here in Ohio, and I think what we're talking about here to just lay it out is that the Medicaid waivers are being funded. The county boards have to pay those waivers. That's part of the mandate, right? But that is a heavy load for the county boards because of um, how much they cost the county based on how much the funding they're getting and how little money they're getting from their local levies. And so it's kind of that's the heavy part, but that's the mandated part. So what's the problem is, what do we have to do in order to continue paying for that? And what are they going to have to cut? And the cuts actually were probably going to be um, to like early intervention and things like that first before they get to like the home and community based. So we're going to see a fall off of those things first, like early intervention, other kind of county resource. Leanne will talk about it. I'm sure what they're going to have to do first, and before they get to the home and community-based services, levy services. Oh, sorry, waiver services. I'm
Jody,
not sure
would
if
you
that
want
answers
me
your
to
question.
jump in and talk about the local perspective now? Yeah. Okay. I'm going to share my screen. Butler County is really, we've been called the tip of the spear. I don't know if I don't think that's a compliment, but I know we've been called that. Also like the canary in the coal mine. But essentially, just a little background on Butler County. We are, depending on what statistic you look at, either the seventh or the eighth largest county board system in the state of Ohio. And we're your neighbors, those of you that are in Cincinnati, right to your north. And what we've seen is a really particularly difficult fiscal situation due to the fact that we have very old levies. So we last passed a tax levy in Butler County. We have two different levies that we're operating on. We have a 2 mil that was passed in 2000, and then we have a 1 mil that was passed in 2004. So we have not been back to our voters in over 20 years. And we've been able to do that for a couple of different reasons. One, a lot of it has been privatization helped us, the privatization of the day services. We were able to downsize our buildings, and really get out of most of the direct service work. And we were very early adopters of privatization. We closed our last day center at the end of 2016, well before it was mandated. So we've been able to see those savings and really pushed us through, kept us off the ballot for a period of time. And then COVID also was a benefit to us financially because we had very low utilization. As everybody knows, people weren't going to programs. Lots of people weren't able to get staff in their homes. And so what would normally have been higher cost to us during those time periods actually ended up being a lot less than we had previously projected. And then additionally, there was a lot of dollars that were COVID relief during that time period that helped us really sustain. But where we are currently, this screen I'm showing you, the screen of doom and gloom, we currently collect about 22 million in local property taxes. Our waiver match in 2027 is expected to be 23 million. So 97.5% of our local property taxes, which is 80% of our budget. We do have a little bit of dollars that we're able to bill Medicaid for case management. And we do some Title 20 grant billing for early intervention. But like most county boards, Butler County relies heavily on property taxes, 80% of our budget. And so now 97 cents out of every dollar we're spending is going to waiver match. Which 3 cents sounds like a lot when you times it times 22 million, but it's really not very much at all. When you think about what it takes to run an agency that serves about 4,200 people. The second impact to us is the historic rate increase, which was so needed, right? That was very important that we get those DSP wages up. And while initially that was 80% funded by the legislature, everything that happened new after the date of that budget, that 38% increase goes directly to the bottom line of the county boards. So any new services, any new people, anything that's happened since that was originally funded, we are bearing the cost of. And this to me is the most simple way to explain to people why are county boards under so much fiscal pressure right now. If everything you paid for went up 38%, or pick one thing, if your mortgage went up 38%, what sort of changes would you need to make in your budget to be able to continue to afford to live in your home? Very similar for us. And then we have also seen immense growth in our county. So when we last passed our levy in 2004, we had 250 people on waivers. We're now at over 1,200 people on waivers. So that's a 380% increase in 20 years. And that's a good thing. All of these things are really good things that we want to see happen. We want people getting more services. We want the abundance of services to meet people's needs. But the fact of the matter is 40% of that is coming right out of your neighbor's pockets. And so every time those costs go up or more people move into our county, we happen to be a county where people really want to live. I don't know why. I wish I knew what the secret sauce was there. I tend to attribute it to the fact that we have some really great providers in our county, lots of really good high quality day services, good transportation, an abundance of homemaker personal care providers. But we have the second highest transfer to county transfer rate in the state. So people are coming here. We also have pretty good networking with our providers and our families, and people want to be where they know their provider and they have a network of folks. Let me show my next screen here. Oops, sorry, went the wrong way. This is our projected increase in our waiver match. It's we're projected to go up 12% for 2027 and 10% annually thereafter. So we are at the absolute tipping point where we are not going to be able to pay our waiver match next year without new funding. So we are on the ballot in May, asking for new money. And then just to talk a little bit about how that's impacted us here in Butler County, this is the part that I think a lot of people struggle with. Counties and state government greatly have to balance, right? We cannot go into debt. So when counties pass new levies, they collect at a very high rate initially, typically. And you bank that money and you save it and you stretch those dollars across the entire lifespan of your levy. And when you have a continuous, you can be like us and go 15 or 20 years if you're allowed to carry cash reserve. The problem with what's happening, what we see with the schools, is there's a lot of criticism around cash reserve and a lot of misunderstanding about the lifetime supports, right? We have to have cash reserve because we cannot predict who next year is going to move to our county or whose parents may pass or who may say that's never been connected to us, we need services now, or how many people are going to graduate from high school. Those are all numbers that move pretty significantly for us and can. So once you start spending into your deficit, to your reserve, you go into deficit spending, it takes more money to build that back up again. So because we have to pay our waiver match in the first quarter of each year, we don't collect property taxes till about April. So if you don't have money in the bank to pay your payroll and pay your property taxes, you have to borrow from your commissioners, then you have to pay them back. And what has happened with Butler County is because we have dipped so far into our reserves, it is going to take us at least 2 years to even come back to being at a budget that is manageable, because we have to get ahead of this curve. So some of the steps our board took in September, we declared a fiscal emergency. We really needed to go on the ballot last fall, but there is an immense pressure for the county commissioners to look very critically at all levies that they put on. I mean, ultimately, we cannot put a levy on without the consent of our commissioners. They are the taxing authority. So they get to decide when and how we go and how much we ask for. And there is immense pressure on the commissioners. They are seeing it directly as the ones raising taxes, even though it's for us. So they asked us to wait. They did not feel like they wanted us to go this past fall. And that has resulted in pretty significant, devastating fiscal impact to us. So we declared fiscal emergency. We paused all wage increases for our staff. We also reduced our work hours, which meant that every staff person who works for the county board took about a 6.6% staff decrease because they work 2.5 less hours a week. We froze all promotions and vacancies. And then the biggest impact is what we've unfortunately had to do with how we support families. When you only have 3 cents out of every dollar left to do all of the extra things besides waiver, so that's Special Olympics, that's advocacy work, that's family support dollars, that's locally funded services. If you have a locally funded transportation service, the only thing we can cut are these dollars. We have nothing, we cannot cut from the waiver match unless there is a change in need for the people being served on the waiver. So we cut our family support services funding in half. And we're only funding respite and camp because we felt like those were the highest need for families. It is very likely, even if we pass, we may not be able to bring family support services back or may have to cut it additionally. We also paused all locally funded services, new services, and I'm going to stop sharing so I can see you guys because I think you've seen all this. The biggest impact on things like that, and I think a lot of people don't realize that this is kind of the beauty of county boards, right? You can see what the need is in your community, and if you have a lot of people that are employed and the only thing they need is transportation to work, there's no need to put that person on a waiver. There's no need to do that because the cost might be $15,000 a year. And over the lifetime of their services, until they need a waiver, there's not necessarily a reason to use that service. So you can save money, you can negotiate rates with local providers, and you can limit, I'm going to use the term liability, but not in a negative way, that liability that exists when you give someone a full waiver package, right? And they don't necessarily need all those things. So we, unfortunately, in Butler County, we have cut everything locally funded except for transportation for competitive employment. And that is absolutely on the chopping block, as well as early intervention. If we fail, we will no longer be able to provide the early intervention direct service. And that's a service that we know saves money in adulthood. So again, it's one of those things that county boards are really good at. They have the expertise. I think historically, unfortunately, we probably should not have been doing that for free. We should have been saying probably 10 years ago, hey, we're doing this for free and we have the expertise. We should have been working on some funding. But, you know, this is, again, you learn as things evolve, right? We currently have not cut into that service yet. Lots of different reasons. One, we know how important it is. The second thing is there is no plan for how it's going to be addressed. And that is a very finite period of time. Early intervention is 36 months that we see kids. You lose that 36 months, it's gone forever. This is not like something we can say, oh, you can ride around in a shoddy wheelchair for another year and we'll get you a new wheelchair in a year. Those brains are developed at that age of 3. Of course, they have still development to do, but you know, when you intervene there and you're working on feeding and you're working on head control and you're working on walking and you're working on speech and language development, that is a crucial period of time. So I keep saying they're gonna have to pry it from my hands, but if we fail, it absolutely will be on the chopping block, the direct service piece of that, which is the in-home coaching. Somebody somewhere will figure out how to pay for it in a couple of years, and those kids that are lost in the meantime, unfortunately, will be the victims of that process. But we have more cuts still to make, even if we pass, because our waiver match has just absolutely exploded in our county. We also are a very high rate, which is fine. I mean, we're second highest rate in the state as far as reimbursement rates. And we have great providers who are utilizing services. I mean, we just got a reconciliation. We were one of 8 counties that owed because our providers are billing almost 100% of what we're authorizing, which is a great thing, right? It means people are getting service, but it is a very heavy burden on the local tax dollar. And to be honest with you, it's not the warm fuzzy stuff that people like to hear about. People care about it, that know about it, but the general public gets very confused about, what am I paying for? Early intervention's easy, right? You can show a cute kid learning to walk and you can say, we fund this. And that's, our polls tell us that's like number 1 or 2 service. But I think it's a little bit harder for people to wrap their own heads around, wait, my property taxes are paying for a Medicaid program? And then you get into all of those dilemmas and dynamics around who should be eligible. And I won't get into all of that. But so, locally, when you get over this tipping point of your waiver match being such a huge part of your budget, you become very limited in those things that you can fund, like wraparound services. We aren't paying for wraparound, not that we don't want to and don't need to. It's very needed. We just do not have the funding, and I cannot cut from waiver. And I mean, we did a layoff last week. We're going to be expecting another huge layoff in our agency before we even pass, because we are projecting our funds out. Even with the new levy, we can only stay off the ballot 5 years, and that's with making another 2 million. When all is said and done, our budget this year is about 40 million. We're going to cut about 7, which is huge. Those are real people and real families who are not going to get service because we do not have the local dollars to pay for those things.
Leanne, do you think that when the 24-25 budget came down with the 38% increase, and that was it's not like it wasn't funded at the state level, like that was the budget, so they funded it.
80%.
But at your level, what?
80% funded, yeah.
Right. So at
yeah,
your level,
yeah.
was there like guidance that came down from the state or anything for the county commissioners of all the county boards to understand that, okay, guys, in the next couple of years, this is going to mean that you're going to have to increase your budgets?
Yeah,
Was there any
was a
talk
lot
at
of
that?
conversation. I mean, I'm sure Jake could chime in here. I was somewhere else at the time, but I do know the history. There was a lot of conversations and a lot of concern from the county board perspective. But in our county, when we haven't been on the ballot in 20 years, I am re-educating everybody on everything we do. We, as county boards, I think we've been victims of our success. We've done a really good job of picking up where everybody else has gaps. So mental health has a funding gap. We say, oh, we'll take care of it if they've got a DD. Children's Services has a funding gap. We take care of it if they have DD. I can tell you that the panic that I'm feeling from my, cohorts, other, Family and Children First Council, we fund them the wraparound to a tune of $103,000 a year. We could not give them any money this year at all. And they're panicked. They don't know how long that service is going to last because we were a huge funder of that. We also funded Project Life in our county. We are not funding that next school year. I don't know what that means. It probably means less kids will get to go to Project Life. We also were funding a special needs cabin at Camp Campbell Guard to extra staff so that kids with physical disabilities, adults too, could participate in camp. These are all things in our communities that county boards have historically filled the gap so that people with disabilities could be included in these activities. And if we become only a waiver pass through, we're not going to have that ability, that flexibility in each different county to do the thing that they value. Like in our county, we have an incredible Best Buddies program. We're not going to be able to help them with that. And so hopefully those college students are going to be able to pull it together themselves, right? To run that program. But it trickles down. It impacts everybody. It's like squeezing a balloon. Same with schools. We provide support to different schools in different areas, and we just can't do it anymore. We don't have the funding to do that.
Do you think Fix the List had an part of this as well? Because I think parents, I'm a parent as well. I was on the list. My kids were on the list. And then all of a sudden it was like, we fixed that. Now you have to ask for an assessment to get you kind of back on a list again or something.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's definitely had an impact because there is a straightforward process now. We've had a lot more people. I think there's been some fallacy out in the general social services entities of what the county boards can do. And so we do get a lot of calls from families that have been told, oh, well, Children's Hospital said I should call you and get on the waiver. Um, and there's, not to get into the weeds, but in Ohio, there, some people are using the waiver as a way to get medical care for their medically fragile children. And we really need to be looking at, Jake can talk about, I always get the name wrong, what kind of state? I'm going to have the
Katie
wrong,
Beckett. Katie
Katie
Beckett.
Beckett. I was going to say Lucy Williams. I always pick the wrong name. So we are advocating for Ohio to be a Katie Beckett state, which means if you're medically fragile, you can have access to Medicaid without having to get a waiver. Right now, I mean, I'm sure you guys know families who, yes, they may have middle class or even better means, but when you have a child that is truly like on a ventilator, it doesn't matter what your means are. You cannot afford that kind of care, or your insurance may not cover that kind of care. And so what we're seeing is families coming to us desperate for Medicaid, and one way to get Medicaid is the waiver, which really their waiver services don't necessarily match their needs, right? They're not going to have homemaker personal care staff in their home. They need Medicaid. So there are some things that we're seeing that have impacted. And yes, I would say Fix the List was a piece of it. We do, we now have a timeline when someone is on an immediate need that they have to be given a waiver in 30 days. In a county like mine, that's a real pressure point, because I'm writing a check for the commissioners that they have to cash, which they don't really like that. They don't find that agreeable to them when Leanne is saying, "Oh, here's money you have to pay." So we're getting to a point where, I mean, I hope that Butler County is not the test case for the system, whether or not it can sustain this sort of pressure. But I worry that, not to make it too much about us, but if we fail, it will absolutely cause a ripple effect across the state. And there are other county boards who are close. I mean, Hamilton County is also right behind us with their budget. Their waiver match has grown incredibly. Cuyahoga's waiver match is 88%. And all it takes is a couple of these big counties to collapse, or for their commissioners to say, you know what? Bill us for it or sue us for it. And then what? Right? Then what happens? Because county commissioners don't love being told that they have a debt to pay. That involves an agency that they oversee but don't control. So it's been challenging. Joni, I see your hands up.
Well, it was just actually specifically to what you named at the end there. I had typed it out beforehand though, which is Jacob, I don't want to put you on the spot too much, so I don't know if you're able to speak to this, but last August, Clay came to the board's board and presented on some of this, and he did specifically speak about how right now this might be happening in Butler County, but this may be happening everywhere pretty soon if we don't take a good hard look at how this structure is set up. So I was just wondering if you feel able to speak about that at all. I know we may have some other people on the call. But just because I know he was the one who sort of opened my eyes to that of like, oh my goodness, this is not a one county problem. This is a statewide crisis.
Sure. Yeah. So there's been, I think, a shift in understanding based on one of the things I think we've mentioned here is cost projections. That's something that started about 6 years ago, being collected, made public available, right? Like in part so that we could have a system-wide look at where the financials were, try to see risk and try to see some of these issues kind of before right? We don't want to get to the test point. You don't want to be at that point where someone's out of cash and suddenly have to figure it out. I think maybe one or two requests for formal hardship or kind of relief funding from the state over those course of those years. This year alone, we've seen, I think, triple that number. Next year, it could be, depending on the numbers and the projections, it could be twice that, even more. We're in the process now of collecting the new round of projections. So hopefully here, in a month or two, we'll have a much fresher look at kind of the cash balances and projections and stuff system-wide so that we can start planning at a state level. But yes, I mean, I think there was a recognition last summer, right, that we were seeing this kind of statewide and kind of different pieces in places as well. I'm pretty new to this role. I've been here a couple of months, but in part, I do grant work for about a decade and then moved over kind of into this space, partially, I think, because Clay recognized the need for more support and expertise and kind of like the long-term sustainability piece. So the past several months we've been focused on, at least in my shop, I've been trying to put the shop together to really kind of look at this all systematically, right? Like we've got kind of a short-term goal of stabilization, right? To using what resources we can to try to keep things afloat while we have these broader discussions for like the long-term piece, with the understanding that, it's likely not just a blip. We need some sort of big component, which again, there have been plenty of conversations, especially in the past 2 or 3 months between OICPD, DoDD, other, lots of groups kind of working together to try to figure out what does that long-term path to sustainability, stability look like. But yes, I mean, I the short version is, yeah, we've seen requests increase a whole ton even in the past year, and we anticipate those to keep going up, and are trying to figure out, what our plan is moving forward.
I think one of the things I hear, so like I serve at the Council of Governments in Southwest Ohio. We serve across 6 county boards, right? So we're sort of, I have kind of a unique position, well, like many of you who are kind of these regional roles where we can hear and see about these trends. And to what Leanne stated earlier, and I know she and I have spoken about this, like for a long time, our system has been thankfully able to step in. Like when there is a somebody who kind of falls between the cracks or who doesn't quite fit into a category, if they're within our purview, we have worked really hard to be able to safely say yes, to say, like, what can we do? How can we support? And so it seems like as we come up against these hard barriers for funding, part of what I think is going to be a hard, I don't know, it's just hard, is that there's sort of this sense of like, well, but do they understand the need? Like, do people understand the need? And it's like, well, the need isn't the question. Like, the need is there, period. The need is there, but the funding isn't. And so, when we hear about, I mean, even from the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, like, we're going to make these sweeping cuts, but it's not going to touch the elderly, blind, or disabled category, is what we have been told. But when you look at the cost breakdowns, it will not be possible to make the level of cuts that are being requested mandated. We that cut can't happen without impacting this category. Like it functionally, the numbers don't number. It can't be done. So I don't know. I think that part of those hard conversations, and Leanne, I don't envy you because I know that you're doing this all day, but it seems like part of the harsh realization that's happening amongst systems right now is that limitation, like there's no flexibility here.
Well, what you're finding is we may have fixed the list, but those of us that are in these financial hardships, we are having to push every timeline. And that's only going to stay true, especially as we downsize. If we get 60 days to make a determination, we're taking every minute of that because we need to delay enrollment for cost savings. I mean, it's not meant to be unhelpful. We have to take the little bit of give that we have so that we can try to control how long and who's paying what, and it's extremely challenging. And everybody needs us. Like everybody on our list needs us, but the people on the current needs list, we can wait up to a year, and they're going to have to wait because we can't write, like I said, write a check we can't cash. There's this dance between, yes, there's a rule, but there's also the realism of you can't buy something you can't pay for. You can't buy this on credit.
I think part of this conversation, as we kind of wind down here, is what can we do? I mean, we have this group of 30 right here, and I think we're all passionate about this work and serving this population. And Jen, I mean, Leanne, you are, hitting the pavement all day long now. But like, what are some practical things that we as citizens can be doing?
Well, I would say there's some priority things that the association and then the provider association, DODD, we're not ignoring this problem. We're attacking it. We've been working on it. A couple things that we've been talking about with legislators is that early intervention piece. We should not have that gap in our state. So I'll talk about that specifically, and then I'll let Jake talk about anything else. But we would love to see early intervention be a mandated service and partially funded. We're not asking the state to pay for all of it, but if it's not mandated, it is absolutely the first thing that's going to go in every county board that gets in a fiscal emergency from here on forward. And the impact of that is real, and it's dollars in adulthood that we're going to spend. So that is a message that I think most families can get behind, and most people that receive support can get behind, because we want people to be as independent and have the most integrated, successful life as possible. And early intervention is a huge key to that. So that is one area that I think we can continuously advocate for. We can talk about, I mean, it's an easy one to talk about and it's an easy one to explain. And just getting that as a mandated service for county boards, because we do have that expertise and we are very good at that service, would be a big step. And then I think Jake can also talk about some of the other efforts that we're really doing a grassroots effort, but we're looking for families and individuals to share their stories and come with us in these legislative meetings. Even if you just do one, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, no, I thanks, Leanne. And I would say, yeah, we've been meeting as a county board system. Our board of trustees, our CEO Adam has gone to many county boards to just explain kind of the situation that we're in, similar to how we're having these discussions right here. But he's also, OACB is also meeting with our other local HHS partners almost weekly or bi-weekly, meeting with parks, library districts, EMS, all these different entities that would be impacted by the property tax issue to kind of game plan, what what that, like Leanne said, that grassroots advocacy effort looks like, especially in terms of just the overall property tax elimination. And so I think on that respect, I'd love to come back maybe in the next couple of months to just kind of provide an update on what that looks like, because as Leanne said, it's going to take us all. We've met with a lot of legislators who understand or seem to understand, at least by the end of it, or at least could see by the look on our faces that we're trying to make them understand what is going on. But we can't do that with everyone. And we can't do that across the state at the same time. And so I think, just having those local conversations and explaining to them the importance of the property tax dollars to the services, that these dollars are services for people with developmental disabilities. They are not, they're not there to make have a building that just sits there. They're there to provide services to people with developmental disabilities. And I think that's what's going to have to be shared with people, is that these are service dollars, and that if they are not there, people will not receive services that they so desperately need. And so I would say the help is just trying to make that local message known. As you meet with county commissioners, have meetings with other parents or providers, is just sharing, what that role is in the system. And then, we're talking with the department, as Jacob said. We're talking with, the ARC. We're talking with our provider association partners about different ways we can maximize property tax dollars,
Mhm.
but also find different ways where maybe the state comes in at a certain extent, instead of just property tax dollars being towards the waiver match. So I think there's a couple different things that we're doing, and I think right now we're in the very early. We need to test the temperature, um, kind of with the legislature. It is it's a supermajority Republican legislature, so it's very not wanting to spend money. It's trying to find ways to cut things, and so we have to approach that pretty carefully. And so we've been just kind of testing the waters on some of these things. But I think in the next month or two, we'll probably have more ways that to get families involved, to get providers involved. But as Leanne said, I am also working with our advocacy coordinator all the time to find ways that we can promote the voices of people with developmental disabilities in terms of testimonies, legislative meetings. There's always stuff going on. So, you should have I'll put my email in the chat, but, always happy to connect and find ways that we can continue advocating for, this community.
Yeah, and I'll add, I will just do a shameless plug for the ARC Spring Conference, April 10th, at the Hamilton County ESC. Adam Herman's going to be coming to that, talking about this again, getting more information out to families about what's going on in the system, and he'll be available there to ask even more questions, along with lots of other great speakers. And so check it out. I can put the flyer in the thing. But I will say, just because I have to, as an advocate and a family member, I'm just not, and the ARC is behind families 100%. Families, it is impossible or near impossible to get a Medicaid waiver. It is near impossible to use the Medicaid waiver. I am seeing so many appeals, unnecessary appeals, attorneys at appeals that aren't necessary, that are costly. I do think there are probably over the years things that county boards probably didn't need to do. And the Medicaid waiver is the most important to keep our family members out of institutional settings, which I think someone talked about before about, what's mandatory and what's not. Well, like Medicaid, institutional institutions for our family members are mandatory by Medicaid. That's the mandatory piece that we talk about. What's illegal and discriminatory is institutional settings for people who do not want them, which was decided in the Olmstead case in 1999. So there's two pieces to that, and that's why the HCBS stuff is optional, but not really, because we do have, the Medicaid waiver, which should allow families to stay and thrive in their community. And I'll just tell you, as an advocate, families are struggling. Children are struggling, teens are struggling, lots of people on my caseload in their 20s who are struggling. So we're not going to stop helping people advocate for waivers. People that get their waiver definitely needed their waiver and need their waiver and should maximize their waiver budget as it's allocated in their ISP. So I guess I just wanted to make sure that that was really clear, and we're never going to stop fighting for families. We're the families that are pulled out. I mean, my little Evie is 13 years old with Down syndrome, and she will get out there and stand in front of legislatures and go up to DC and stand in front of reps all day long. But I'm not, and we can pull all of our families at the ARC to do that and stand on the steps of the State House and get our 38% increase after 10 plus years of fighting for that. But we're not going to apologize for it, and we're not going to go do it unless we're all on board that we're going to continue funding what is absolutely necessary for families. And I just want to make sure that all of our 88 counties are on board, and obviously we all are, but don't fight with families on things that they need if you can, because it's exhausting to see some really, really hard fights, and not necessary. With these families, it's hard to ask for help, and it's hard to talk through the trauma of your diagnosis and all of the things that make it hard to get a Medicaid waiver. And there's so many families that do not have waivers. So more families than not do not have it. And we also just need to know the piece. I know we said 5%, goes to county boards. 62% of our property taxes go to schools, which are going to affect our kids too. So, and we're going to talk about that at our spring conference as well. And that's what I've been really kind of focusing on a lot in my advocacy. We have a lot of money for private vouchers for kids in our state. We have a lot of money for all kinds of ridiculous stuff, subsidizing all kinds of terrible things. But we don't have enough money for people with disabilities to stay and live in their community, not in an institutional setting. So that's all. Sorry, I had to say it for my own sanity.
Jen, I feel like I guess I think to me this sort of that ties it back nicely to like what can we do? One of the things I've been saying a lot in meetings, because at least from my perspective, anytime we're getting to the point that we have a team meeting, like if we're discussing somebody's, whether even if it's just discussing like what could the waiver do for you or an ISP update, and like everybody at that table right now is frustrated. The families are frustrated. The county board is frustrated. You know, the local children's hospital is frustrated. Like, and all of the people who are frustrated, part of what I guess I feel empowered to do from conversations like this is to redirect us to, hey, at this table, we're actually on the same team. Everybody at this table is here for this kid, for this young adult, for this family member. Like, we want what's best for them. And if everybody here is feeling frustrated, let's pay attention to where is that frustration coming from. Hey, we want to make sure that you're aware. Here's some of the information, right, from these flyers, from these resources that we have put together, that like, here are places that the legislation is impacting what we all can access. And so I don't know for anyone else how that feels, but at least for me, I think that that can be helpful as a reframe, because again, I think most of the time the people I encounter are wanting to do good things. And so I don't want us to spend our energy fighting each other, because we're not mad at each other. We're all trying to do what's right by the people that we encounter. So I'm really grateful to know that the ARC is doing that. I know that OACB, I know DODD is, I mean, across the board. I mean, Butler County, you guys have been great too about sharing what you're going through. Like, as much as possible, just kind of making this information accessible, because so few people understand how it works. And I think that that has been part of what's gotten us to this place.
Yeah, I'll say there are little counties I work with and big counties I work with, and it's not even about funding. It's about how the families in their county are doing and what the relationships are like, how hard everyone's working, that if your job is, sometimes I'm at, Joni, like you said, I'm at a meeting with 15 people and we're like, what's the solution? There's no solution. Well, there's 15 people on this meeting. Like, what are we doing? You know? And then we have a higher rise and we have all these different things that are like, great that we figured out how to fund that, but it's not working. And maybe we had a DD system that just needed that money instead of another waiver? So yeah, I don't know. It's tough as a person with kids and works in the system and like does 100% believe that everybody at that table does care. It's really hard because it's sometimes really ridiculous, some of the decisions that are being made. Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, to Jen. 10 years ago, 11 now, 2015, House Bill 64. We tried in Hamilton County and across to get families involved. Families, they don't have the time, they don't have the energy, they're exhausted. When you talk about those of us at the table now, it's like we don't have the money to mount any kind of campaign. We only have the numbers, the people. But back then, there was in the budget state monies that went to the county boards, like Jack, you were just talking about very specifically. And that was when it was taken out. And Leanne, I wanted to ask you, because at the same time, new levies were sort of imposed this surcharge, this 12%, because at the time, if a county board renewed a levy, it was at the same. If that 12% that came from the state budget that matched into that was taken out, so that if it was, that was my understanding at the time of why Hamilton County did not put new levies, even though we needed
Yeah,
new
that's
money.
true. That is a good piece of it. That's another complicated. I believe it's anything before, Jake, you might know this, 2013. Do I have that right? Still getting that 12% kickback from the state. So that's why people haven't done replacements, because once you do a replacement, now they do have some language in this anti-continuous levy bill to accommodate for that. Like, I don't know all the details of it, but Yeah, there is that piece as well, Cindy, that impacted those old continuous levies, why people didn't replace them because there was a state component that was being paid of those. So we'll still have that, but our levy is collecting at a very low rate right now, like 50 cents on the dollar or something.
So it comes back to, again, we don't, as a group, have any funds to mount any kind of campaign. So Jen, at the Arc, if you just tell us what to do, who to call, how to, you know,
Yeah, I know, Cindy. I feel you. I feel like at this point we're just trying to like stave off destruction, and that's what we've been doing. I don't know, since 2016. I don't know. So yes, I hear you. And we're always up there and we're always talking to them. And someone else said this, they don't ever want to hurt our families. Like it's always, this isn't about DD. The work requirements won't hurt them. The eligibility stuff is not going to touch that. You know, any changes that we make are, we love those families, you know? So that's the patronizing
mm,
kind of thing we're dealing with when we talk to them. And I talked to the Speaker of the House. He has no, we are not going to cut anything for DD in this legislature. There will be no cuts. Okay. So, I mean, where's the money going to, they think it's all going to, well, they don't think, they know that it's not true, but they're saying that it's going to come from these work requirements and these other places. And it's just not. We've already learned that in a couple other states. It didn't, the amount of money they're already trying to save up to even deal with the bureaucracy of doing that is going to cost them just as much as it is going to cost in savings. So, and we all know how Medicaid works. It's so hard to get Medicaid. Um, so I mean, if there was a dollar, I mean, Gary Funks is always in discussions with the folks up at the IDD. What do you guys need to make this work? And I think Leanne and everybody here has been in those same discussions. And so we'll continue that. And if there is something that we can come to everybody and say, hey, this is what we need to advocate for, this exact amount of money or whatever. And I'm guessing in the next budget, it's going to be a lot of discussion. I have an advocacy group in Cincinnati area that meets on this Tuesday or tomorrow, actually, at the Down Syndrome Association of Greater Cincinnati at 6 o'clock. I started that group just last year in January, just because we're just going to talk about the budget, the Ohio budget, and how can we advocate for services in the Ohio budget. And then all these Medicaid cuts started to be discussed in the big beautiful bill, and we kind of turned our discussion over to that. And we were told the budget's going to remain the same. The budget doesn't look bad. What looks bad is that we're shifting all of it. The federal shifting to the state's shifting to local. And so now all of our local levies are going to be foundational, I guess, to how we're going to fund everything. And that's what they want. If they get rid of property taxes, income taxes, it'll all have to come from a really local level. And we just have to decide what kind of society we want to live in here in Ohio. Vote, vote. I'll tell you that. That's really important. We should all vote in May and November.
And
But yeah, we'll be
research your
out there.
research your candidates, find out where they stand. Because I
And
will
county
tell you,
commissioners are really important.
your
Yeah,
local officials are probably more important than who you vote for governor.
they are.
Because I can tell you that our local officials are the reason that we are where we're at right now. They're probably 75% of the reason.
And nobody even knows who their county commissioners are. You know, most of us don't. And so it's like these guys have a lot of power over, it's all about the money. Wherever we're putting our money is what we care about, right? So, and those guys have the power to put the money on the things that they care about. So we have to vote.
And I think it's something either, I think you may have said, Jen, but like just the educational piece. Like, a lot of our county commissioners, I don't think understand how the system operates and what those funds are actually, you know, being collected for. I've talked to superintendents who have talked to commissioners because they're finally going on the ballot, and a lot of the information I said today, they didn't know themselves, and they're the ones that are approving levies or approving budgets, and so I think those local, like, yeah, I mean, I interned in DC, worked at the State House, and I've learned that the closer you get to home, the more impact elections have. So, um, yeah, great points.
Yeah, and county commissioners definitely don't know our kids and our families. They just don't know anything that we deal with unless they have it in their family. That's really the only way they are gonna know because they're definitely not out there caring about our families, right,
There's a
Leanne?
few exceptions. There's a few
Maybe.
exceptions. I'd give a shout out to Denise Treehouse in Hamilton County. She's incredible. She knows our system quite well.
Well, Hamilton, yeah.
Well, I gotta say something positive about it.
I'm more talking about us here. Like I'm in
Yes,
Warren,
yes,
you're
yes.
in Butler.
It's challenging. It's challenging.
It
I would
is.
say it's probably even more than they don't know, they don't even want to know.
That's right.
I think, we just recently did a poll and I can leave everybody with this because I think it's really encouraging. And that the respondents who had had a personal interaction with a person with a disability, the difference it made in whether or not they considered the importance and understood the importance of what we were asking for, and they're more likely to vote on said issue was like, I don't even remember the exact percentage, but to me, it was very motivating to say this is the work we need to keep doing. We still need to be including our folks, making them a part of all these conversations, involved in the things that involve them, and connecting people with communities, because that's where the value comes from. The sympathy vote is passe. I'm tired of that. We'll take them. I won't say I won't take those votes this May. I'll take whatever votes I can get, but I think I would love for us in the next 10 years to go from a sympathy vote to this is the right thing because this is what we value in society. We can get there if we leverage the way we talk about this work and, make up people who are uncomfortable around our folks, figure out how to help them become comfortable. The only way you can do that is exposure and conversation. So I will say it's not all doom and gloom in Butler County. We are harnessing this. I heard a legislator last week say a statement that pressure is a privilege. And so I'm trying to see this pressure right now as a privilege. Because it doesn't feel like a privilege on a lot of days when you're having to make hard decisions that affect families. But there is hope. I think we don't need to get too bogged down in that because we are a strong arm and we can definitely make noise when we want to.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is a perfect note to end on. Thank you, Leanne. Thank you, everybody, Jake, Jacob, Jen, and Joni for helping the conversation. This was super informative, and we are going to revisit this topic in August. We have it slotted to do some updates, so we'll be in touch about that. I shared the Padlet in the chat and added the resources that Anne shared. Next month, we have a demonstration and presentation on the Danny Plan. It is an online platform to keep your life completely organized, and it's super user friendly. Anyway, it's really awesome. So definitely tune in next month, and obviously I will be in touch with emails and social media posts and all the good things. So thanks, everybody.